Okay, so with the upcoming summer banner, we officially have a lot of characters stuck in seasonal hell, including Leonie. But that's okay because she's a bow cavalier and that is interesting to talk about. So let's do that. Enjoy the vid.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to talk about our brand new upcoming Tempest Trials hero given to us for free within a few days of this video. Now I'm pretty excited about this one because usually we don't get that many interesting toys. Last one we got that was interesting was probably Innes, but now we have Leonie. So yeah, let's talk about it. First of all, I'm going to be a little bit speculative in this video because we don't actually have Leonie stats in the game yet, but there are definitely some lines of reasoning that we can conclude certain numbers to work. So before we jump into stats, I want to tell you what she comes with in terms of the bow. So it ends up being the defense bonus for her minus defense on the enemy, and if the enemy has any sort of bonus defense, she's going to basically amplify her own defense and kind of neutralize the enemy's defense bonus. So that's pretty good actually. It's not too bad. It's not like I don't know if I would call it better than Spendthrift, but it's not bad. It's actually a solid option, especially if you consider that it does effectively give you physical bulk and increase her damage overall. So for an inheritable option, it's not too bad. I don't know if I would consider it the best. Probably the best would still be either Firesweep or Budding or Spendthrift, or even Pledging Build, depending on where you use it. But those are definitely some pretty good bows that you don't necessarily need to fodder Leonie for this bow. So it's not a bad one. It's not a great one either. The condition is fairly easy to meet. Anyways, let's talk about Leonie, and we don't have official art for it either yet, so that's why she's not going to look like this. She's going to look a little bit more normal. But the stats. How did I come to those stats? I could definitely be off here and there. The HP stat is the only one that I'm confident in because we did get from the trailer a solid 44, which is an additional 3 based on, well, we know that they add 3 HP in those trailers because it's probably the Lunatic map or whatnot, or Chain Challenge or whatever. Anyways, we know the HP is final, but the others are more speculative, and I'm going to assume based on this criteria. So first off, her base stats and growths from 3 houses. I'm going to go specifically with growths here. As you can look at the growths on the far left here from 3 houses, she pretty much undoubtedly will have a low res stat. I would be surprised if she had a high res stat, but it's pretty atrocious actually in 3 houses. So I could see it being completely dumped in favor of basically giving herself more defense, speed, and attack, which is very likely, with my guess being more speed favored, but definitely not lacking in defense or attack either. If she does end up having a much higher attack stat, that's actually wonderful and actually a great boon to her. I'm going to play this pretty conservative and assume that they don't pump her attack stat and definitely work more on giving her speed and defense points, which is what my speculation here confirms. Of course, we'll know this in a day or two, but based on the info I have here, I'm definitely going to come to the conclusion that they'll likely work on speed defense and not give her too much attack. However, if they do give her a lot of attack, that's going to be amazing. Another thing that's definitely worth considering and how I came to this conclusion is just basically what we have in terms of the other calves, right? So the ones that came before her are Merlinus, and no, not Merlinus' wonky stat spread, I mean the amount of points he has, which is 163, which is what we can definitely conclude from Leonie. It's a shame she doesn't come basically a month or 2 later when the new CYL boosted stats come out, but it's been a while since we had a bow cav in general, so this is still going to be a pretty solid boost. Of course, the last one before that actually being Rolf, and as you can see, Rolf's stat spread is going to look fairly similar to Leonie, but she's going to be a more up-to-date version, and I actually am going to appreciate that she has high defense and hopefully higher attack. Those would definitely be good things in the current meta, since most meta threats are hitting defense, and if she actually has a solid defense stat, that's only going to help her become meta viable for sure. Now let's actually talk about the fodder she comes with and some example builds to get you guys thinking about how you can effectively use Leonie in the time to come, or possibly wait until she's in the Grail shop or you know, comes back through ephemera and you complete her that way. Definitely some things to think about. So she comes with attack speed push 3, reposition, speed, defense, link. Now I don't actually think reposition is like even in the Grail options, so that's kind of cool, I guess. As push 3 did come from Petrine, so it's not too unique, and speed defense link is unnormed. So again, when it comes to fodder, that's pretty disappointing, but the weapon is at least a solid contender for decent fodder if you decide to do that, which I would highly recommend against, because there's a lot of use you can put out of Leonie for sure. Fodder is whatever. It does link into push 4, which could be a good solid consideration. The first recommended build I would think about using is something like this, which is mixing some budget options and non-budget options. And when it comes to these builds, again, guys, use what you have, consider your options, try to create something similar based on what you have. So Sunflower Bow isn't actually a terrible weapon to just keep, and the reason for that is because it still increases her physical bulk and increases the damage that she does, and kind of like says, don't buff your defense. Like it like kind of doesn't really give an advantage to your opponent buffing their defense. So if you effectively combine that with low attack speed, you're essentially giving her an attack, speed, and defensive advantage over the enemies that she attacks into, which I like that sort of synergy. So replacing the bow isn't actually necessary. I still think that probably Budding Bow or Spendthrift or Firesweep Bow are solid alternatives, but that doesn't mean you need to go and switch to those immediately. Speed and res will help her for sure. Res to balance out her bulk to not make her completely frail against res. Consider though, if you use her in anima, you should pair her up with Mirabilis, and Mirabilis does buff res, so that will help her out balancing her bulk, and some attack buffs from Siros or Duma, potentially some of the best anima mythics, will help her as well. So in terms of her speed and defense, they don't necessarily have to be buffed, and the res and attack could always go up more if possible. Of course, this is, again, more in line with budget and premium options. If you don't have Fatal Smoke, that's okay. It just happens to be the best that you could put in C. But other stuff like Defense Smoke, Savage Blow, Award Cavalry, Joint Drives are all solid alternatives. But Fatal Smoke is very good in the current metagame. But yeah, that's basically how I would start with this. Another thing to think about, of course, is the Fire Sweep option, which a lot of bow calves can run right now, and it helps them quite a bit. If you happen to land on a Fae, attack speed push 4 is an easy link up because she already has push 3. Running the double poison strike with Fatal Smoke is extremely good if you happen to have that, because you are effectively chipping damage without worrying about, like, let's say Mystic Boost Fallen Edelgard, healing 13, and if you poison strike for 20 with 0 damage, you're pretty much doing like 7 chip damage with 2 poison strikes, which can feel really bad. But when you use Fatal Smoke, you don't ever have to worry about that, and you are effectively really hurting those sort of tanks that rely on that healing or that bulk to really survive, or their effects and whatnot. So this is really solid. I've seen some Wrath Pythons, Rolfs, Luis, whatever, Bravelin all run this style of build, and it is really good. Merges go a long way to even increase the viability of this. Having physical bulk is great for the enemy phase because, as I said, the meta is very saturated with physical threats as opposed to magical threats. The magical threats still exist, but I feel they're more counter-pick-ish, meaning like if you're going to think about Guinevere or let's say Micaiah, they're more like res-based. They're going to want to fight the magical users, and that means that someone like Leonie would lose to them anyways, and pumping their res doesn't really do too much, where you can just go for a solid hit on those type of units. And that's why I think like dumping her res is actually the favorable outcome. If she actually ends up having a res stat, that would be pretty disappointing, because that means her other stats would suffer as a result of that. A final build I do want to talk about, and this one is more variable based on, of course, what her attack stat ends up being. Right now in the current game, there aren't actually that many high attack bow calves. I believe like Legendary Leaf kind of caps out on this, and he's already kind of old-ish. So if Leonie does break the 35 attack stat barrier, this is actually, as I speculated, 33. If she ends up breaking that, then she will actually end up being a very solid Deadeye user. And Deadeye can be enabled in many ways, including Grand Scratcher, Osteopulse, and those are the 2 big ones, yeah. But there could definitely be future ones as well. Think like Pent buffing magical users. So she could definitely be one of the best Deadeye users if her attack stat actually ends up there. Now, of course, another reason that I feel like Deadeye is as good as it is because a lot of enemies use damage reduction nowadays. You have your Fallen Edel, you have Spring Myrrh, whatever. Like, it feels like everyone and their mother has damage reduction at this point. So accelerating your Deadeye to be charged or near charged is really good on defense. I've used Legendary Leaf many times successfully because of this. And Leonie, if she ends up having a solid attack stat, will really make use of a Deadeye Slaying Bow build, should that be accelerated and combined with mythics such as Duma and Siros to buff up the attack stat even further. One last thing that is worth talking about is, of course, how you would fit her into defensive team compositions. So this is just a sample kind of outlook here. Of course, this is not like a finalized map by any means, but kind of thinking about sort of team compositions and who would you combine that with. One of the biggest problems, I think Rolf being replaced by Leonie here, one of the biggest things with defensive team compositions is you actually do want a diversification of color coverage nowadays. So if you can make your team have green, blue, and potentially even a red threat, that'd be really good. As one thing you'll find missing here is, of course, a red threat, because budget red threats aren't actually that common. They are more premium in nature, and the only real one that can really work is probably something like Valentine's Titania, but even that is a little bit suspect. If Leonie ended up being a red bow, that might have even been better than being colorless. Colorless does conflict with, let's say, an odd recovery healer, or just another bow cav that you might have already built up, such as Rolf or Luis. So it might feel kind of bad to you guys who already have that. And then if you don't, then definitely consider Leonie. But stuff like combined with Reinhardt or Cecilia does give you some pretty solid options. So yeah, think about these type of partners, a sort of layout that definitely combines a lot of cavalry threats. Think of your premium options. If you have something like dual Lif or dual Sigurd, of course you got to use that stuff. Dual Peony, whatever, Veronica, if she's merged up, those are all really good things to think about. So with that being said though, guys, I am fairly excited about Leonie's potential as a bow cav because I've been actually waiting for a while to see what they would do with an updated stat spread. The weapon she comes with isn't too bad either, although I don't think you should fodder her. And yeah, with that being said, hopefully you make use of her if nothing else. She does have some potential as well on air offense that I didn't cover in this video. A brave bow, hidden run strategy could definitely work with her, but maybe that's to be covered somewhere else. Maybe I'll talk about that on the Twitch stream, which you can feel free to join and have a more lively discussion with me as always. If you like the video, smash that thumbs up button, sub to the channel if you're ready already, and of course check out the Patreon below if you want to keep supporting the content and see what we keep doing. Love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.
It's over.